Peter, let's talk about your businesses. I mean, that's what, 16, you left school, 17, you set up your first company, and you've had, what is it, 25 companies owned, managed, controlled, taken into the market, brought them out of the market or whatever. We'll come on, if we may, to space energy, but tell us a little bit about your business, your business world, if you like, your business background, how that came about, and what you really sort of learned from those early years, to bring you where you are now.
Well, I think I mentioned, I was never really academic, and we invalidate so many people through the academic system. I mean, school teaches you two things. It teaches you how to pass tests and work for somebody else. That's kind of it. And neither of those were high on my agenda when I was a young kid. In fact, I remember the headmistress calling my mother into the office when I was 5 and saying, "Mrs. Sage, I need to have a word with you." And this was the kind of old school headmistress that even the parents were afraid of. And she says, "I think your son's going to be a businessman." My mother looked at her like that. So I says, "Well, in art class today, all of the children made some sweets, cut them out and coloured them in, and your son went and sold his and took everybody's dinner money." Following that, I think my first experience of money growing on trees was when I had a conker tree in my front garden at one of my homes, and of course every October I had money growing on trees, so I go around selling them at school. But no, I mean my mindset at the time was I never really wanted to go and get a job, because it seemed to be quite plain to me that if a job is going to pay you, let's say £200, £300, £400, £500 a week, whatever it is, then whoever is paying you for that job, let's say it's £200 a week, the job has to be worth more, otherwise the business wouldn't be profitable. So therefore, by definition of taking a job, you're being paid less than what you're worth. And for me, that was quite a clear sort of distinction. I'm like, why would I do that? Now, fortunately, I didn't have the addiction to certainty that most people have, that keeps them locked into a paycheck. And the world was an exciting place. I worked for my dad for a short time. He owned a scrapyard. He kind of owned his own job, and I learned some valuable things there, like never work for your parents because they don't pay you enough. And I was earning £40 a week, big money. And I turned around to my dad and I said, "Listen, Dad, I'm leaving at the end of the week." He said, "Well, what are you getting into?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, in all fairness, Dad." I said, "But I have a belief, which I still have, which is if you jump in the deep end, you can only swim." And so he gave me my last week's wages of £40. I paid my mum £10 board. I paid my friend £10 I owed him, and I had my last £20 note to my name. And I thought, what am I going to do? Anyway, I drove to a wholesaler's. I had a little Mini at the time. This is in the days before Minis were cool.
Yeah.
And I drove to a toy wholesaler's. I blagged my way in, and I bought £15 worth of toys. I drove to a car boot sale, and I wound the window down in my Mini, and I handed my last £5 through the car boot sale, wondering if I'd ever see it again, and ended up selling the whole lot for £30. And I went back the next week. I bought £25 worth of toys. My mum gave me credit on board, and I spent my last £5 on a car boot sale. I sold the lot for £50, and I built up and up until I got enough to cover a market stall about 6 weeks later, and then I started doing markets and Sunday markets and toy parties. I was 17 years old, and my catchphrase was "Pete the Toy Boy." But do you know what it taught me, Glenn?
Yeah.
It taught me the fact that attitude is everything. Not for the reasons that most people would think, although letting go of an addiction to certainty is a huge part of that, and that's a whole different conversation. If you want the fast track to the learning there, I'll sum it up very quickly. That the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty you can comfortably live with. I'll say that once more. The quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty you can comfortably live with.
Yeah.
And when you start to understand that certainty doesn't exist in nature, you can kind of let go a little bit. But back to the point, the attitude shift that taught me was this. If I went to a toy party or a market stall, and my attitude was positive, I would sell twice as many toys than if my attitude was not positive. Now think about this. This is the same toys at the same price in the same marketplace to the same customers. What's the difference? Where's the magic ingredient? The magic ingredient was that if I was positive, that energy would brush off.
Yes.
I couldn't explain it. I didn't understand quantum physics. I didn't understand energetic mechanics. I didn't understand the power of thoughts and vibrations and attraction. I was 17. I just knew that if I thought in positive terms, I would get positive results. If I thought in negative terms, it would cut my sales in half, case closed. And it was incredible. For an awareness at that level, that's when I started looking and got tied into personal development, and then it was like, well, of course, I mean, that's what I've been doing. But attitude was so much of a key, and I'm like, where was that at school?
Yeah.
Where did we have the attitude class?
Yeah.
I'd much rather learn that than algebra. You know,
or even the optimism class.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, you know?
You know? Yeah.
And it's based, now we understand why. I mean, you can go, in fact, I think I was with you back in 2003, Glenn, in Germany, when I first saw on screen, based upon Stanford University research, a thought wave tracked on like an ECG, where we actually saw it on screen, a positive thought and a negative thought, and the intensity of the thought was enough to morph the other thought into the opposing thought, the less dominant thought.
Right.
So the dominant thought would morph the less dominant thought into itself. And I'm like, you mean we've known this for 20 years and it's still not taught in school, that our thoughts, which can be measured in science, have such a vibrational impact that it can attract, not only attract similar thoughts, but it can actually attune less powerful thoughts to that level. Now you look at the flip side to that, and the amount of negativity that people have, and you're wandering around kind of mediocre, you're automatically going to get sucked in. It's just a scientific quantum physical reality, based on law, not based on mumbo jumbo, kind of positive thinking. Positive thinking and the power of positive thinking is no longer a concept. It is a demonstrably proven scientific level of reality on fact. And it's as if we didn't know. I mean, all you've got to do is go out and validate and think positive thoughts versus negative thoughts. But where we come into the 21st century media-controlled, media-induced level of awareness that most people have, their entire window on reality is through the media. And the media's sole purpose is to induce uncertainty. I don't know if people have figured that out yet, but it's all the same news, it just keeps happening to different people. Hello. That's why I don't read newspapers. But if it can induce uncertainty, not report the news, has no vested interest in reporting the news. Right? If you ask yourself the question, well, what's going on in the world, the answer is quite simple. Everything. What do you want to choose to focus on through a medium called a newspaper or CNN, constant negative news? All right? Right?
I've heard that before. Yes.
Or is it GMTV? Get me the Valium.
Yeah.
Right. And if you were to focus on a microcosm of what's wrong in the world, it's called a newspaper. And the reason is not to report what's going on. The reason is to induce uncertainty, because so many people are addicted to certainty that in order to then replace that level of uncertainty with more certainty, we go back to the media and it's a sales cycle. Has nothing to do with reality, it's a sales cycle. You want a prescription for mental health that'll improve your life in 30 days? Easy. Yeah, no Prozac, guaranteed. Turn off a television, don't read a newspaper.
Yeah. And as you said, I think recently, it's the same old news, it's just different people. And I thought it was fantastic, I never thought of it like that as well. But it is, isn't it? It's just different people.
Ask somebody a question. Right? What did you read in a newspaper last Tuesday that A, you can remember, right? And B, has a positive impact on your life today, right? And you won't get an answer. 99 times out of 100, you won't get an answer, right? So, if you look at it through the sort of common sense goggles, which is unfortunately not very common these days, ask yourself another question. Why would I, in my life, want to sit down at breakfast and read about somebody I didn't know existed, have never met, would never meet, and all the crap that's going on in their life while I'm having cornflakes?
There is, of course, a bigger picture here, which we'll come on to later in the interview, because I want to talk about oneness. And of course, that other person you're talking about is also you, right? We'll come on to this in the sort of bigger picture. But one thing I wanted to mention, this whole thing about quantum physics, I found totally fascinating. As you know, I've spent a lot of time myself looking into this in the last few months and years. And for people watching this, if you haven't read David Wilcock's book, which is absolutely amazing, called The Source Field Investigations, which is a recent book, and I highly recommend that. It picks up on some amazing stuff, including the fact that scientists have now scientifically proven that electrons respond to love.
Yep.
They've even proven this now. This is in line with what you were saying about the energy of thoughts, and you know, but it does, you know, without getting on a sort of soapbox or anything, it does make me wonder why a lot of the stuff in quantum physics goes back to the early 1900s. You know, there was the experiment that determined that the observer affects the observer, for example, I think it was 1919 or something, of a British physicist, and yet none of this, all this seems to have, you know, gone, if you like, past us and not even featured, certainly not in my school, as part of our education, which I find extraordinary. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. This is all about you, Peter, and not about me. Your experience of relationships in business, I'd really like to, because I think you have some wonderful stuff that you can share with us about relationships generally, but certainly in business, and how you've, if you like, cultivated is probably the wrong word, but how you've come to a place of, you know, bringing the right or the perfect or whichever label you want to put on it. I don't really want to put a label, but bringing those people into your field of influence that have been, if you like, perfect and right to support you along the way as part of your business ventures. I'm jumping slightly ahead here. We'll get on to space energy, but tell us a little bit about that.
I think the most important part of any business that I've started is the vision. The vision is everything. The vision is the foundational block of where things start, because you know, if you don't have a vision, you're a rocket without a stick.
Where they start or where they end?
End.
Yeah.
See, I get a picture of what the business will look like when it's finally done. In detail. I'm talking the colour of the carpets in the office, the kind of people I want to be selling to, or you know, the kind of suppliers I want to be buying from, the kind of staffing that I have working with me, the kind of difference that we're making with the products or services that we do, the ripples of contribution that go out in the world. All of that has to be felt, from my perspective, and encapsulated into a quantifiable, articulate vision that then becomes the driving force, the desire, the burning sort of fuel behind how, you know, I'm going to create this. And we all bring different skill sets to the table. I'm not a very good businessman in terms of, I'm not a good CEO, I'm not a good implementer. Yeah, I'm a visionary, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a big picture guy.
Yeah.
I need detailed people to mop up the mess after me. I'm not a detail guy. But vision is what's always captivated me. And that's why I've built 22 companies, I think now, somewhere around there. Some of which have outright failed, flat. Some have been spectacular failures. Some have been excellent businesses. Some have sold. Some have lost. Some should have stayed ideas when I was drunk. But for me, it's all about getting the excitement about this vision, about being able to see it in detail with clarity. And then bang, I'm off. I want to build that. Once it's built, I'm bored. Because I'm a builder, I'm a creator, I'm a visionary. I'm not an operator. I'm not a maintainer. So then it's like, okay, move that. What's next? And a couple of examples. I mean, I had a business I built in 2004, and I started with nothing. I lost a lot of what I did in 2003. Sat for 4 days around candles. It's quite a popular story that I tell. And I started a new business a couple of weeks later with no money, and bootstrapped it up. And I remember I hired a guy. I got him to walk away from about £100,000 a year job here in England to work for me for nothing, on the basis of the vision that I'd put together. He was so compelled and sold on this, because if I could see it crystal clear, he could see it crystal clear. If I can't, nobody can. And he actually made about £250,000 in the first year he worked for me, and bought his dream home and called it Sage House, which is one of the huge tributes I'm proud of in my life. But I remember walking into an office with him and my future finance director, and we didn't have a huge amount of money for a lease, but I needed a bigger office to cope with the vision that was going to happen. And we were offered this dilapidated it was a modern building, but the company before had gone bankrupt and taken everything. We're talking the ceiling tiles, the light fittings, the carpet tiles, the light screws. I mean, it was a mess. Wires hanging out of holes in the roof, and it had been stripped. And I walked in with the two guys, my sales director, my finance director, and I'm walking through this office block, and I'm excited because I can see what's happening. And I've gone this tour, and I've come back, and they're like, should we leave? I mean, this is just, it's the worst place we've seen out of the 5 places we've looked at. Let's not waste our time. I'm like, you kidding? It's perfect. Like, what do you mean? I said, well, follow me. Because what they saw was wires hanging out of a ceiling, a rundown building, and when they followed me, and I'm like, well, look, here's the sales office. Here's where the people are sitting in the desks. Here's the phone calls being made. There's the sales board on the wall. There's the marketing department. Hugh, there's your room. That's where you are. Here's your office. Here's where the staff room is. And when I built up the picture, because I could see it so clearly in my mind, they came on board. They're like, wow, yeah, we get it. But the starting point of a business is the leader, the CEO, the founder, the entrepreneur behind that is his level of clarity in the vision to begin with. Because then you will attract people that believe in that. How can you possibly expect somebody to believe in that if you don't believe it yourself? And how can you believe something you don't see? Because then the vision will always change. Or if it's cloudy or blurry or black and white or fuzzy, I mean, that translates into an inner sense of uncertainty or lack of clarity around what you're doing. And nobody's going to walk away from a 6-figure job and follow you if you're doing the uncertainty dance.
Yes, sure.
And so
this is, a great example of where your passion comes through. I think you really hear it in your voice when you talk about it. Do you, you and I are both, of course, big fans of Vadim Zeland, and he talks a lot about the vision, following the vision. He also talks about regularly going back to what he calls the slide, which is, if you like, the vision of the done deal, as you would call it, or the completed company, the completed vision. Is that something that you do now with Space Energy or anything else that you're associated with?
I do it every day.
Every day, of course, yeah.
As you know, I live in Dubai. Dubai is quite an anomaly in terms of places in the world. As you know, I've lived in many places around the world and travelled to most of the countries I have any inclination to visit,
right.
and some that I don't. And Dubai, I like Dubai for many reasons. The lifestyle, the weather, the modern infrastructure, all of that kind of stuff. But there's a very important part of Dubai or important lessons around living in Dubai that I think anyone either looking at Dubai or looking at, as you say, the goals that they want to achieve could possibly learn from.
Well,
and that is that Dubai is very false. It's very artificial. There's incredible culture and history behind the Emirates, which is thousands of years old. But Dubai as a modern city has very little soul, it has very little culture. And part of the reason for that, in my opinion, is that it was built on a mandate of significance. It was built on a mandate of how can we be bigger, better, more than everybody else. And rather than built on a foundation of how can we contribute to our people. And the original United Arab Emirates was founded by Sheikh Zayed, who had
So more like a shop window than the people running the shop, is that what you're saying?
Yes, in a way. It was more about how do we attract people than care about what we're selling them, to use that analogy.
Right.
But the original Sheikh Zayed, that was one of the founding fathers, was very much loved and respected and admired by his people. And his whole focus was external. How do we put in the sewage systems for the people, bring education, bind together our differences to basically become stronger? Now, the current leadership at Dubai, growing up under that level of shadow, would possibly be thinking along the lines of, okay, how do I become more, leave a bigger legacy than that? Because that's almost what's expected. So it's almost a case of covering up the insecurities and saying, how do I make it bigger, better, grander? But that's an internal reference. It's a case of how do I, it's an internal insecurity issue. It's an egocentric need. I need to build Dubai to where it is so that I can prove to the world, fill in the blank.
Yes.
And that's why I think Dubai caught a cold. Now, coming back to my original point, once you understand that Dubai is false, then you can play Dubai on your terms, and it offers a phenomenal lifestyle. If you start getting caught up into the same need for significance, and you want to be seen at all the parties and drive the car and spend all your money trying to convince other people you have more,
yes,
right, which is a lot of people in Dubai, and get caught up in what plays on people's insecurities, then it's a tough place to live, and it'll probably spit you out in 12 months drunk, bankrupt and lonely. But if you can maintain a level of groundedness, dip your toe into the fun when you want, but have some sort of level of realism, grounded contemplation. And that's why I spend a lot of time in third world countries to remind myself what's real. In Dubai there's no crime, there's no poverty, there's no old people. I mean, it's manufactured, it's not real. It's a great lifestyle, but again...
And even a lot of the buildings are on reclaimed land. It's like almost the...
I live 2 miles out to sea.
Yeah.
Technically.
Yeah.
On a man-made island in the shape of a palm tree. I mean, you couldn't get more false than that. But for where Dubai is, every morning, what I make sure is that I meditate. I come downstairs, I get up 6 a.m, I come down about 6:15, I've done some energy exercises upstairs, I have a spot, I live in a beautiful place, I know you've been there as well, and I sit in my window looking at the ocean, and I light a candle, and I go inward, and I make sure that I ground with the essence of who I am, that I feel to be far more real than the man-made island I'm sitting on.
Fantastic.
And if I can do that and maintain a level of vision for where I want to go, and again, I journal a lot.
Yes.
And what I love about journaling is that it's you talking to you. Yeah, it's a dichotomy if ever you wanted to sort of flag one up. And I'm sure Eckhart Tolle would love to have a whole conversation about that. But it's capturing reflections and insights without filtering it through what do I want it to appear if somebody else is reading. How do I validate myself, look good, appear a particular way if somebody else is reading on what they think of me through reading that. It's a lot of times what we do, verbally, written, or what have you.
Sure.
Yeah, how do I capture stuff and actually sit there, and the only person I'm lying to is myself if I do that, then what's the point? Yeah, if I screwed up, I'm going to journal it.
Brilliant.
And see what I did, why. What hooked me there? Because we're all human, I'm not perfect. I still get hooked. I still have moments where I think I'm trying to fluff up my tail feathers a bit and trying to appear significant in some respects, and then afterwards see, do I still need that pattern? But it's still there. So let's explore that. And I can have an honest conversation with myself. But if you can maintain, and part of my meditation in the morning is getting a vision of what I want to, where I want to be, but holding it in a mindset of that it has already happened. Because as we all know, and I'm sure many viewers to your regular interviews, which many of which I've enjoyed, are more than familiar with your thoughts create reality. And so if you can convince your unconscious mind as to what it is you want has already happened, the first thing it does is get rid of doubts. The second thing it puts out the energy and the vibration of being able to attract that into your life. And I think that's important, whether it's relationships, whether it's business, whether it's love, whether it's passion, whether it's hobbies, whether it's anything.
Sure.
But for me, I've used that substantially since I was 17 with the businesses that I've started.
Fantastic. Tell us about space energy. Where are you now with space energy? How far along the timeline, if there is still a timeline for that end goal, if there is an end goal, and is it still fun? Is it still your real focus? Is it still your real passion?
Space energy, for for those that aren't too familiar, was an idea that I was exposed to 6 years ago now by what I effectively call a mad scientist who showed me a technology where you could put solar panels in, instead of on rooftops where every night it gets dark, you put them in space where the sun never sets. You can transmit that energy back to Earth via radio wave like a cell phone signal. And my first thought was, well, if that's real, it could change everything. A permanent, clean source of energy transmitted on demand anywhere on Earth in real time. I mean, that's the holy grail of renewable energy. And so I did some due diligence and I validated the fact that it was real. And I spoke with NASA and Boeing and Raytheon and some of the big players. And yeah, it was just a commercial timing that was questionable. It's going to happen. It's a technology you will see in our lifetime. Yeah. And a lot sooner if I can help it. And I decided that, wow, this is so important that it's more important for me to make this happen or try and move it forward than it is caring about how financially successful it will make me. Again, one is an egocentric based level of motivation. Yeah. How can I be on the front cover of Time, and how can I make $10 squillion? And one is wow, if this can really serve humanity at a level that gives me an opportunity to, again, leave a thumbprint on the world in a way that is a legacy. I mean, wow, that's every entrepreneur's dream. Or every entrepreneur that is emotionally mature, because certainly in my 20s I'd have said, stuff that, how much money am I going to make? Yes. Yeah, and if the risk reward isn't worth it, I wouldn't do it. Now it was a case of, wow, that's incredible. If I almost have to lose the business to move it to the next step, for somebody else to pick up the baton and move it forward, I mean, wow, I'd do it anyway because it's too important for the world. Anyway, and as to your question, 6 years later, we had a tough year last year because it was very hard to raise money, and I've pretty much exhausted all of my own resources into the deal. Right now, we have 3 different levels of activity moving forward. One is a ground-based solar park I'm looking to do with a government in West Africa. Okay. One is a listing on either the UK or German stock exchange as a result of that, which I've got meetings this Friday to move forward. And one is to fund the latest concept and system definition study for the architecture of the satellite and the demonstrator, which I'm hoping we can tie up in the next 4 to 6 weeks. That'll either be through the government of China or India, or it'll be a case of, well, globally we need to sit on it for another year or 2 before we commit funds, and therefore it's on a back burner and I'll have to look for alternative avenues. But I'm still committed. I still believe in the technology, and no matter what happens, I'm moving forward until my feet fall off.
Is it a timing thing? Have you encountered resistance in terms of your potential? Because on the face of it, as you say, I mean, it's a no-brainer, really, isn't it, that you can really deliver from space solar-based power for what I understand to be a very modest price, to the end consumer, ultimately, obviously via governments and so on. But I'm just getting a sense maybe that have you encountered resistance along the way from these people? Is it a financial thing? Is it a political thing? Is it a mindset thing?
Well, one has to always come back to the psychology, because every behavior, every decision, every action is preceded by a thought, and that thought is generated and usually directed by certain psychological principles, like avoiding the fear we're not enough. Patterns that are controlling us that we're not even aware of. Right. Beliefs that we've had since we were children that we still own and have never questioned in the last 30 years that may no longer serve us. So,
and we may not always recognise them either. That's the key, isn't it? Yeah.
But if you look at the principle behind funding a project like this, governments, unfortunately, most bipartisan or tripartisan governments around the world, are not set up to serve their people. Their primary mandate is how do we become re-elected in 4 years? Yes. And as a result, that is the primary driving factor. Very few governments are willing to be unpopular in the moment for what they believe to be the long-term greater good.
Short-termism, basically. Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah.
And you take England right now with the coalition. I know from what I understand, and I don't follow politics and I don't follow much what's happening in Britain these days, but from talking to friends, there's been a lot of cutting back measures, and a lot of people are feeling the pinch right now. And that was a strategy that the government introduced initially based on a gamble that within 4 years it would pay off and it would be the right call. If they thought it was going to be a 6-year journey, they wouldn't have done it, because after 4 years so many people would have been that upset with them they wouldn't have got re-elected.
Yeah.
So if you go to a government like China, China's a one-party, somewhat communist state, and from what I've learned with China is that it's a very interesting structure, especially in modern day. It's changed a lot in 20 years, as most people know.
Right.
But China's overarching governing methodology is still communist. China's economy is driven by capitalism. The membrane between the two is controlled corruption. That's China, and it's open. People understand it, and once you know how to work with it, then you can deal with it.
It's okay.
But if you go to a government like China, if they think that it serves the long-term greater good, they're far more likely to want to get involved. If you go to a government like India, which is a 40, 50-year political experiment right now, or go to America, which is just set up to be defeatist politically, because if one party supports something, no matter how good it is, it just becomes a target for the other party. Yeah. It's so black and white, Republican, Democrat, in that it has no underlying validation as to the actual credibility of the idea that's put on the table. And so there's many different factors involved in trying to get a project like ours supported, and I would love it to go to a country like India, because I think we can do so much with bringing rural electrification to poverty in the third world. If I was to put money on it, I think it's going to be China, because China, it's, apart from being massively energy hungry, massively cash rich, massively liquid, it's also very decisive. And there's a huge amount of political will behind projects like this, provided it serves them at a national level of interest.
Right.
So it's understanding the game. It's understanding the different psychological factors, and not just saying, well, my business plan works, it stacks up, why wouldn't you do that? That's 3-year-old thinking. It's a level of emotional immaturity when you can really put the blinkers on and just think that way. But my product, my service is so good, why aren't people buying it? Well, let's bring our peripheral vision into that and say, well, if I'm dealing with governments, I have to understand the need for significance, the need for certainty. Who is writing a check? What questions is he asking himself? Not based on how good the product is, based on how well he's going to be covered if it goes wrong, for example. So there's many other different factors. And it's the same when you have staff in your organisation. Most people think they're motivated either by fear of being fired or by dangling more money, and there's so much more to it than that. Each person is motivated by different things, and a company that puts a culture together that becomes successful, where people want to go to work, is a company that understands that people are motivated by different things. And you see examples of that, rarely, but some great examples of that all over the place. Virgin would be good. EasyJet in its early days, the Ritz-Carlton, some notable examples of places where they've really spent time on putting that culture together. Cafe Gratitude, another one.
Absolutely, yeah.